Hey everyone, welcome to Locked On Lakers for Tuesday. Brian Kamenetsky, Andy Kamenetsky. Are the Lakers primed to get off to a slow start? At least one local writer thinks so, and we'll explain why next.
You are Locked On Lakers, your daily Los Angeles Lakers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thanks to everybody for making Locked On Lakers your first listen of every day, Monday through Friday. No matter how or where you get your podcast, this one's always going to be free and never behind a paywall. Locked On Lakers on YouTube is where over 25,000 subscribers are all hanging out. And Andy there are hoping the Lakers can get off to a quick start this year that might serve them well as the season goes on, something we're going to get into today, along with some really interesting questions about potential decline for the Lakers and the way LeBron frames success. All of that coming up in a second. We do want to let you know that today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. I don't know. It seems like every year we talk about this, but every year it gets more and more important. The idea, if you're going to keep a LeBron James, Anthony Davis team as fresh as possible heading into the postseason, it really helps, Andy, if you can get off to a good start. And our friend Dan Woike in his weekly newsletter for the LA Times outlines a few reasons why that might not happen, potentially even including something as I don't know, minor sounding as a mini camp before training camp starts next week.
Well, I would say the minorness of it is in the eye of the beholder, because when Dan's newsletter included the following quote, LeBron James appeared on Lakers social media this week in the team's weight room, a sign that his post-Olympic reset has come to a close. These kinds of long summers, the ones that he and Anthony Davis agreed to in service of country, push everything back and change offseason plans. Both players are back in the gym, though things in the upcoming weeks will be a little different. The team, as of now, will not be taking one of the player-led mini camps that it's done in the past. Maybe it's a perk of continuity. Maybe it's an acknowledgement that there is no need to push things right now. Either way, the Lakers' two most important players put their bodies to use and left some of the available mileage in Paris in search of a gold. That bill could come due if they're not careful. Both players, though, are smart when it comes to this kind of stuff, so it's safe to expect they'll ease themselves into the season, which doesn't exactly scream hot start. I saw both fans and some members of the media covering this team react with varying versions of upon hearing that there would not be, for example, a mini camp. My reaction
just for people, for context, it's usually like a couple days of team only practices and bonding workouts and stuff like that. Usually in a cool place, like, they go Vegas or, something like that,
it's
so
typically organized, or at least has been in the LeBron era, by LeBron. He's usually the one that gets everybody together, which stands to reason that if LeBron, along with Anthony Davis, but in this particular case, LeBron is looking to recharge after the Olympics, and he's the one typically organizing it. If it's not happening, that is, I would imagine, I don't think it's irresponsible to speculate, this is a LeBron-led decision not to do this.
Well, I mean, to be honest, if LeBron doesn't want to have a mini camp, or AD doesn't, want to have it, just wants to use those extra 2 days to finish ramping up 2.5, whatever it is, not travel, stay in LA, however you want to define these things, you're certainly not going to have one without those guys. Dalton Connect is not going to be like, all right, it's on me to be social chair this year. So, if LeBron and AD aren't going to be the impetus behind it, you are correct. I agree with you. It is likely not going to happen at all.
Yeah. My immediate reaction to this news was just, I see this as a potential trade-off. And if allowing LeBron, and I think particularly LeBron, but also Anthony Davis, additional time off, if that results in a more serious preseason than the last few years, because they're just taking every single day they can to recharge before they enter a training camp and a preseason that'll be treated with more urgency than we've seen over the last few seasons, I am more than happy to make that trade-off. I actually think that is a wise and fair trade-off. If no minicamp, however, sets the tone for a training camp that feels like the precursor to use this early time to ease into everything in a way that actually bleeds into the regular season, I think that's a problem. And just along these lines further, I think any general thoughts of easing LeBron and then again, more likely, LeBron and AD into the season, that's, to me at least, the Lakers resigning themselves to the play-in at best. Like, the West is too tough, and the Lakers' schedule post All-Star game is brutal. Like, they need early wins. They do not have the luxury of easing LeBron and AD into the season and, we'll ease into the first month, see how things goes, no. Like, they need to rack some wins early on. If LeBron and AD wanted to do the Olympics, more power to them, but that cannot become something that happens at the expense of the team.
Well, yeah, I mean, at this point, they don't have a choice. Like, it's the Olympic thing is done. Like, and if it requires now a certain amount of care, there's nothing you can do about it. Like, and I agree with you in the sense that, it's not going to be good. Like, if they have to take more care of LeBron and AD, and I used Austin Reaves as a template here in terms of, like, last year, he really struggled at the beginning of the year because he didn't have his legs. And Reaves, this experience was new to him. He was coming off a long season, which was with increased responsibilities that ran into the Western Conference Finals. All of that new to him is not new to LeBron. It's not new to AD. So, like, obviously it's not totally apples to apples here, but if they are concerned about legs and, or injury or, fatigue injuries or things like that developing, or one of these guys picks up something that needs to rest, like, you can't choose between compensating for the Olympics and not compensating for the Olympics. So you either like that part of it's done, and now their bodies are where they are. And if it requires maintenance, it requires maintenance. And that will be part of the fallout of the Olympics, which was why you and me, while not begrudging either of those guys for playing, because I don't think that's fair to deny somebody the opportunity to go to the Olympics. It's why both of us worried about it and would have preferred, given a choice, both of them stay home.
Well, I agree with what you're saying to a point, but what I was saying at the time was, if you're going to do this, LeBron and AD, go play for the Olympics, not take that typical downtime, mess with the routine of your off season, that's okay. That's your prerogative. But you need to figure out a way that you can do this while also giving the team what it needs throughout the course of the regular season, i.e. your day job. Or the flip side is, there can't be any whispers from either one of them about either the team underperforming or not getting enough help, or because you can only have so many different things at cross purposes. And the idea of preserving LeBron, that in and of itself is a task that the Lakers have to undertake over the course of 82 games. You can't, if you're LeBron, make that task knowingly harder, then get upset if the results of trying to ease you through the season ends up butting up against regular season wins, because there's concerns you'll get injured if you have to go harder than you want to. Same thing with Anthony Davis. Like, you can't make the type of trade that might involve, say, D'Angelo Russell, when you actually may need D'Lo more during the regular season, in part because the Olympic grind makes it so you're trying to ask less of LeBron and AD. That's too many things at cross purposes with each other.
let's talk a little bit more about that. I want to respond to that, and we'll get into an interesting list about who's going to improve and who's
You want
going
to respond to that,
decline.
Senator?
I do. Next.
Locked on Lakers is brought to you by Game Time. My daughter, she's 13. We've bonded a lot over the years through music. And right now it's Frank Ocean. She is obsessed with Frank Ocean, loves his music. It's great stuff, by the way. And Frank Ocean has not put out an album in about 8 years, but there are some rumors that she's heard that he's going to be back in the studio, which would likely mean a tour. And I promised her, if this happens, I will get her tickets for us to both go, even though it's going to be a hard ticket to score, but I'm not worried about it because of Game Time. They make this easier. You actually look forward to finding tickets. They use features like Game Time Picks, which filters out all of the confusing verbiage and just shows you incredible deals. It saves you time. They offer panoramic seat views before you buy, so you know exactly what the view to the stage will be, exactly everything around you, what the feel's going to be. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off.
So I guess what I would say is it sort of depends. Like, is the criticism of I need more help because our team needs to be better for us to win a title different than the criticism of I need more help to try to get myself through the regular season so like I can be fresh for the playoffs? Because I agree with you. Like, if you do something that makes it so you're less likely to, as you put it in the first segment, do your day job, that at least undercuts a little bit what's like, okay, well, you played in the Olympics, so to whatever degree that robbed you of 2%, 5%, 7%, whatever it is, you did that to yourself for a good cause, but you did it to yourself. Is that different to you than we need to improve? Regardless of my experience, we need to improve because we're not good enough to beat the teams that we're going to see in a conference semifinal, a conference final, and obviously a final.
Yes, because one is a regular season issue, the other is a playoffs issue. As far as what you were talking about with the 7-game series, that only happens when you are in the playoffs. What I'm talking about is putting yourself in the best position when you hopefully enter the playoffs, and then hopefully you have the best roster.
Yeah, I mean, but the deficiencies in the roster could be seen in the regular season too. It's like you need to be better versus like I think
they could be, but it's
there's plenty of overlap. There's plenty of overlap here because
it is difficult to overcome the deficiency of we cannot use one of our two best players as much as we'd like because we're concerned about the wear and tear on him that already exists when he's 40, and then on top of it, he went to the Olympics.
Right. Because
that's a separate issue to me.
Right. There are symptoms of the same thing. Like, if your team isn't good enough, you need to rely on LeBron and AD and those guys more than you would want to, which says that we're not good enough, but you also knew that before you went to play in the Olympics. So it's like, it's not an unknown. It's not like these guys didn't know what the deal was before they went off and played.
All good teams rely on their stars. Like, there's no such thing as an elite.
Like, what you're saying is that they can't. You're saying the team isn't good enough. They don't have enough support behind those guys to rest them as much as would be ideal.
Yes.
And that's right. And so like that, but that tells you all teams rely on their stars, but some teams can shepherd their stars through a regular season better than the Lakers are set up for.
I don't think many can, though. To be totally honest, I think a lot of that is a myth. It's a bit of a separate tangent, but other than the Celtics, because they are insanely top heavy with talent, I think you'd be pretty hard pressed to come up with a team that can maintain like top 4 seed success without riding their stars fairly heavily. I think you'd have a very difficult time coming up with that team. I don't think it's really a thing.
Right. Either way, it's just, I think what we're talking about here, at least how I see this, is a question of if your team isn't just like both, on they're I don't think they're not a bad team, but they're not
a bad team.
But they're not Oklahoma City. They're not an elite team in the West. And so you know what your deficiencies are as a group. And you know what that they need to figure out ways to either improve internally or bring in, make some changes to the roster. So, I mean, I agree with you. I think, it is going to be hard to complain of fatigue and like these guys need more help at the very least without it being undercut a little bit but I don't think it undercuts the argument completely. Like the team isn't good enough. We need more help.
Again, I consider those to be separate questions because let's just say LeBron didn't do the Olympics, AD didn't do the Olympics. We would still be talking about the help that they may need. Like that would be going on regardless. But again, the West is too difficult. And then especially if you have the Lakers schedule, which after the All-Star break, they played like 30 something games. You and I did a count. There were like 5 that as of now are not projected to be in the playoff play-in mix at all. It's
pretty bad.
Like, so bad. They have.
By the way, there aren't that many before the All-Star break,
but it's especially bad
really
after.
Bad
like they do not have the luxury of trying to ease those guys in, whether you think it's necessary or not.
I think that's part of the. It's part of the frustration that we know that they didn't get better in the offseason. I don't think they got worse. I mean, they only got worse, and we'll talk about this in the next segment. As opposed to relative improvements and declines from other teams in the Western Conference. But they didn't take what they had, sort of like the conversation we were having yesterday about, trading D'Lo for a Bruce Brown or Rui for a Bruce Brown or type player, somewhere in that, like the exchanges. And
we learned, by the way, y'all don't want Bruce Brown.
No. And I you know what, I do. I get it. You were more positive on those changes. I mean, I think I'd consider it, but just understanding what the trade-offs are when you subtract something of value in your rotation to add something of value to it. And what the Lakers really need to do is keep the core players of their rotation and add to it. And that's, it's hard enough for them to get players externally. Even if you're allowing for lots of subtraction, it's hard enough to do that. To add to what they have right now is damn near impossible. And so I think when it's all of these little things that pile up with that, it's, they didn't make any roster improvement when you kind of know they're like, all right, well, to jump up, we need to get better. Okay, well, they didn't do that. They didn't get worse. They didn't get better. We're right where we were before. LeBron and AD are coming off the Olympics. Well, you're probably gonna have to be a little bit careful about that. And, God bless them. They won a gold medal for the country, and you can't keep guys from doing that. But it could make the regular season a little harder. You go into training camp and it's like, oh, Christian Wood's not available. Is Jared Vanderbilt? Like all of these things, when you start to put that, not having a mini camp probably isn't in a vacuum isn't a big deal. LeBron and AD maybe even needing to take the first weekend. They play their first preseason game, I believe, is October 4th. So like, maybe they're kind of easing into those first week and a half, but they're kind of full bore by the end of it. Okay. Like, sure. It's when you start to add all of these things up, because they are going to need to learn a new system with Redick. They are going to have to learn how to do things a lot of roster continuity. That's something that will help them because these guys do not need to learn each other in the ways that they had to learn each other in years past, but they are going to have to learn a new system and learn new coaches and learn all these other things. And so when you start to pile all of it up, and then you say they need to get off to a fast start, and then you look at the schedule and it says Minnesota, Phoenix, Sacramento, Phoenix for your first 4 games, Cleveland for the 5th game. You don't see a team against, a low-level possible lottery team until game 6 of the season with Toronto. And Toronto's not that bad. They're not elite in the West, but they're not garbage. You don't see your first genuine lottery team until Detroit. That's game 7. And then you turn around and play Memphis, who should be right near the top of the conference again. Philly, Toronto again, Memphis, an improved San Antonio team, New Orleans at the beginning of the season, Utah, who was always good at the beginning of the year until they decide they don't want to be anymore, Orlando, rising team last year, Denver, Phoenix, San Antonio, Oklahoma City, Utah, Minnesota, Miami. We're in December. I've named one terrible team. They played one game against Detroit on the 4th. I mean, you talk about how difficult the schedule is coming out of the All-Star break. It's just the West is so brutal, and even the East doesn't have, until you get those East Coast swings where you get to see Charlotte a little bit and Brooklyn and stuff like that. But that doesn't come until close to the middle of the season. The Eastern Conference teams they see before that are Toronto a couple times and Atlanta, who are at least competent. It's just brutal, and there's not much wiggle room to fall behind.
Just because you can find a tangible reason to want to ease LeBron and AD into the first month and change of the season, trying to do some type of formal ramp up, the reality is you don't have that luxury. Need doesn't equal can do it. It just equals need.
It goes to the challenge that they have this year, and it is a difficult one. A quick reminder: today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use code Locked On for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Download Game Time today. What time is it? Game Time. Part of what, Andy, we were discussing with this Western Conference Challenge is based on like who we think got better and who got worse. ESPN has a new fresh list on that, and you will maybe not be surprised which end the Lakers appear. We'll get to that next.
Locked On Lakers is brought to you by FanDuel. NFL fans, you can enjoy this season with a big return on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. And now let's just say you're watching a game, you start getting a hunch on how things are going to play out. Maybe you can predict where all of a sudden one team is going to start surging. Check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. It's information, it's streamlined, and you can get started with $200 in bonus bets, guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. Plus, as we keep talking about, we are getting closer to the 24-25 NBA season kicking off, and our friends at FanDuel have options for you. As of this recording, the Lakers are 35-1 to win the championship. Anthony Davis, 150-1 for MVP. LeBron, 200-1. Anthony Davis, 25-1 for Defensive Player of the Year. Max Christie, 150-1 for Most Improved Player. That's FanDuel.com.
Okay, Andy. So every year we see these things where the numbers folks start crunching them, and they try to figure out who is set to get better based on projections and who is set to get worse based on what the numbers are spitting out. And unfortunately for the Lakers, while they are not projected necessarily to go into the proverbial turlet, they are not one of the teams that Kevin Pelton at ESPN thinks is going to make a big old leap next year. They are on the wrong side of this equation.
Yeah, ESPN Bet has their win total projected at 43.5, which obviously is fewer than the 47-35 record they had last season. A little bit from Pelton, quote, having brought back nearly the entire roster, rookies Dalton Knecht and Bronny James are the lone newcomers on full NBA contracts. The Lakers could be the purest test of these predictive factors. The Lakers had the biggest positive gap of any team last season between their expected and actual record at 4.5 games, going a league best 11-4 in games decided by 3 points or fewer. No team had more than 9 wins by 3 or fewer. And as Laker fans would surely point out, they actually lost 28% more games due to injury and non-COVID illnesses than the NBA average, but those absences were disproportionately concentrated among role players. Then want to note that LeBron and AD played 147 games after just averaging 103.5 the previous 2 seasons, and that of the teams that outperformed their expected record by 4 to 5 games, 61% declined the next season. Then Pelton said, adding the likelihood that LeBron and AD miss more games, falling 3.5 games would make sense. I guess some of this is a question of how much do you think the Lakers, for all of the issues and turmoil and bizarre decisions that we talked about last year, their ability to come through in close games, how much of that do you think was real versus just luck down the stretch?
Well,
the ball bouncing one way or the other.
Most statistical people, because this was the number that really stuck out to me, because that is a number that implies, or at least could imply, that they were a really good team down the club. By the way, they were a pretty good fourth quarter team last year. But they're good down the club, like well run, well executed, well coached, all this other stuff. If you're winning a lot of close games, that's what that number can often imply. And of course, the Lakers were not seen to be a well-coached team and all these other things. And so,
well, if they were, it's too late now.
Right. No givebacks. Wouldn't that be amazing? So most statistical analysts across sports will tell you that these close game things tend to be relatively luck based, and like they will even out over the course of years. And so, you're unlikely to be 11-4 2 years in a row. I don't know, but like,
I don't know enough about how this stuff is.
I'm saying, but like, even if it's true, like he says, 30, it means only 39%. I think the number he used, 61% backtrack, 39% don't, miss their expend. There's all kinds of reasons why that would or wouldn't happen.
Weighted coin flip,
basically. And so they might regress in close games, but win more non-close games, which again could be something that indicates like maybe they should have had more non-close games that would allow them, through better coaching and all that other stuff. I think so that was one number that stuck out to me. And the other part was the emphasis on LeBron and AD's health. And that is not something that people are going to get away from. Is the broad assumption with all of these things is that LeBron and AD are not going to stay healthy in the same way that they did last year, because that was the exception to the rule. And while I think people like Pelton and these equations underestimate the importance of the 28% extra role player games that they lost last year, I think they were more damaging to the Lakers than they might have been to other teams, or at the very least, they were just really damaging. Had LeBron or AD missed an extra 10 or 15 games each, they would not have won 47 games. It would have been significantly worse than that. So if each of those guys plays 62 this year, which wouldn't be a disaster, that makes it much harder to beat last year's count, no matter who else stays healthy.
Yeah, it would depend on if they're separate absences versus combined
No
absences.
question.
As we saw last year against the Celtics, the Lakers are clearly better when they don't have LeBron and AD.
Yep.
That's when they really form the best version of themselves.
One of Darvin's big mistakes was putting those guys right back in the starting lineup as opposed to going with the hot hand.
Should have made him earn it at the very least.
Right.
Look, obviously, if you are missing your star players frequently, your team is going to have a hard time winning. That the same can be said for all teams across the league. I said before that I do think there are some teams with injury prone or older or both players. Phoenix comes most prominently to mind, that I feel like get more of a benefit of the doubt to either stay healthy or work through this than the Lakers. But to your point, though, about downplaying or even just missing the importance of the role players that were out, it's not just that they, miss those minutes from rotation caliber, rotation expected players. It's the guys that were missing, Vando and Vincent primarily, forced the Lakers to really only be able to play one way. Like
particularly Vanderbilt. Yeah, particularly Vanderbilt.
They ultimately became a team that could really only beat you by just scoring and hoping that your team cannot keep pace, as opposed to, they would occasionally get some big stops when they needed to. And, even Spencer Dinwiddie had a game-winning block last year. But for the most part, they were not a team that could reliably play sustained defense.
Right. And they really only got I mean, I'm going to call it 40 games out of Christian Wood
Yeah.
because, he played 50, but the first portion of the regular season, he was not in shape. He was not playing well. He didn't look good. And so they didn't, to whatever. I know people keep picking on me for saying like, Christian Wood is the difference maker in this, like, like I'm not aware of the arc of Christian Wood's career, but again, it's relative to what you have.
It's
Um,
options.
right. It's, you, as our president periodically says, you judge me against the alternative. And the alternative is you don't have anybody. And so when the Lakers are in a position where Vanderbilt is out and Wood is out, you have very little option to play with more size or, jimmy around with your pairings next to AD, or try to just do different stuff. And because Rui, while a big body, is not a good rebounder, or he's not a rim protector and things like that. So like he's very limited defensively. You don't have options. And while Wood is limited and Vanderbilt has his limitations and stuff like that, they provided things that other players on the team couldn't. And so the specificity of who they were missing was a big deal. Like,
and the specificity of how they were forced to play. Like,
yeah,
Rui is I think, a very important member of this team. But given who was available last season and who wasn't, I think you could make an argument that flip-flopping Vando and Rui as far as games available last year, the ceiling may have dropped for the team, but I think the floor would have raised dramatically just because Vanderbilt gives you so many different defensive options that you simply do not have with Rui, where in the meantime, Rui, as important as he is in a lot of ways just doubling and tripling down on all the things you do really well, which matters. But again, it forces you into one lane.
So to put a pretty bow on this last half hour of insightful Lakers analysis, it again just points to, if this team as currently, if they don't get better, to go back to the first segment, if they don't get better around LeBron and AD, and maybe even actively made themselves slightly worse in a bunch of different ways by not being able to, be fully preserved from the offseason, or having your schedule change, LeBron and AD. You have to take it a little easy in the preseason, and that costs you a little bit of momentum or whatever it might be. The Lakers need to maximize all of their what ifs as currently constructed. They need to have health from the other guys and health from LeBron and AD. They need to have Austin Reaves step up a little bit. They need to, have other, Rui maybe take another step forward, and Max Christie play like they are paying him now to do, and Vincent to be the guy that they missed last year, really impactful. And none of them individually are unrealistic, but it's a lot of things that you need to go right.
Sure.
So a million crossed fingers to try to get this thing going in a good way. Still didn't get to this LeBron stuff, which is good. It's a really interesting conversation brought up by our friend Grievous Vasquez, former Hornet, among other things.
Also, too, because there is a press conference with Rob Pelinka and JJ Redick this coming week. Leave us some questions, whether in the community section, I put up something about there, or about this there, or just in the comments section here. Stuff that you would like to see Redick and Pelinka asked about.
Mm-hmm.
And if nothing else, we can talk about what we'd like to hear about from this, our opinions on it, whatever. But with that in mind, leave those comments.
Locked On Lakers on YouTube is where you can go hang out with over 25,000 subscribers. Make Locked On NBA your second listen of every day. You can find the show description and the link in our show description, I should say. So you don't have to go around searching for it. Great way to keep up on what's going on around the league as everyone starts to ramp up and get ready for training camps to open next week. See everyone tomorrow.